What's up, world? Thanks for jumping in for another ride. Today we're going to be doing a brake fluid flush on the 2014 Shelby GT500. Got an early start this morning. Sun's just coming up, training like mad outside today, so I figured today's a good day to hang out in the shop and go ahead and get this project knocked out. We appreciate you hanging out with us. The only thing left to do is everything. What I have here laid on the table is the absolute basics of what I'm going to need. I don't know what I'm going to run into as I go through this, but this should cover most of what I need here. There is a couple of different ways to get the old brake fluid evac'd out of the system. Now, one of my personal favorite tools is something like this, and I'll put an affiliate link down in the description below for a good canister vacuum system like this. So with that, this is kind of my favorite style of tool to use, and it basically just has a canister on the bottom, and it unscrews like so, and then it just has the top piece on it. On the back side, you just clip your air hose onto it from your air compressor. Your hose will just clip onto there. And this is just a rubber piece with a small orifice in it that will clip onto your brake bleeder. Now, in 100% honesty out there, don't pay any attention if you see me hooking and unhooking the air hose to the brake vac out there, because, well, this is probably about 25 years old and the spring inside of the handle here is broke. So the lever to activate and deactivate the vacuum on it is broke. So basically, I just keep it really simple and I just connect the air hose whenever I need to create a vacuum and pull fluid through. So this tool has lasted me a very long time, and the reality of it is it still functions just fine. I'm just too cheap to go ahead and purchase another one just because it handles broke, just being honest. And one of the reasons that I really like this tool is the fact that this canister will basically keep the fluid separated. So as you're going with this, you can basically look inside the canister, and as you can tell, this old plastic's pretty faded, but you can just unscrew the top, look inside of it. And so let's say if you've got a rubber hose that's breaking down inside, or a steel hose with corrosion, anything like that, you can basically just look inside that canister and tell if you have any major issues, or if it's just going to be the standard dirty old contaminated fluid. And additionally, as you go through that brake flush process, it's really easy to see whenever you start getting good fresh fluid through there, as opposed to that dirty fluid, because the transition becomes pretty obvious. And something else that really does help that, not only the canister, is that the hose is clear, so you can see that fluid as it comes through the hose. And so that is kind of some of the reason why this is my preferred method to do a brake flush, is it just gives you that visual aspect of if you're looking at any sort of failures or catastrophic failures from any parts or components. Now, you will need a way to jack up and support your vehicle, so just a good jack and a good set of jack stands if you're doing this in your garage or driveway. That'll do just fine. We're going to be doing this on the lift with the bridge jack. And also go ahead and just grab a set of wheel chocks. Right now we have a set of wheel chocks on the front of the GT500. Once we knock out the back, we'll go ahead and rotate those and move those to the back. We're just going to be using an electric impact. Obviously, you'll need the appropriate socket for your lug nuts. Now, I happen to have a specific wrench just for brake bleeders, and this is kind of a deep shouldered 6-point. Now, I don't know if this one specifically is going to fit the GT500, but the reality of it is just a good boxed in wrench will work just fine. You don't need anything specific for this. And to be honest, sometimes just the standard box ends actually work much better because those shoulders aren't quite as deep. And so if you're using a tool like this, you can basically get that box end on and then just go ahead and get your vacuum clipped on top of that brake bleeder. That's just the reality of it. Sometimes those super cool over the top tools aren't really worth it. Just keep it simple. Last thing that I know off the top of my head that I know you're going to need up here is some sort of a torque wrench. And that is just basically to go ahead and put your wheels and tires back on. So not a big deal. Last but not least, you're going to need brake fluid. And for this, I'm just going to be using the Redline RL600.4 brake fluid. This is my favorite brake fluid. This is preferred. Not to get too deep in the weeds here and tell a whole bunch of back in the day stories, but back when I was working out of this shop full time in between my careers, I actually sold a ton of this stuff and I used it on a ton of application working on customers' cars and never had any issues whatsoever. I've run this stuff in a ton of my own personal applications, and the reason why that came to mind is I actually built a pretty cool project, and it was a 2010 Shelby GT500 for a gentleman running his car in the Gumball 3000 across the United States of America. And this is the brake fluid that I used in that particular application for that GT500 to run the Gumball 3000. And this gentleman absolutely put that car through the ringer and never had any sort of weird brake fade, brake failures, brake issues whatsoever. So my thought is, if this stuff can survive the Gumball 3000, then it can survive just about anything. Just one of those things that stuck out that's pretty cool in my head, but obviously you do not have to buy this. I'll put an affiliate link down in the description below if you want to use this. This stuff is great for any sort of spirited driving, standard road applications, track driving, whatever it is. But the Redline stuff is by far not necessary by any stretch of the imagination. There is an absolute ton of good brake fluids out there on the market. You can basically run down to any auto parts store now and pick up a good synthetic high quality brake fluid. So this is just the one that I prefer, but go ahead and choose whatever works for you. So there is a particular process to this. So just to keep it simple so that you have that 5,000 foot overview, is basically we're going to use the vac to go ahead and pull any brake fluid out of the master cylinder just right off of the top, because what we don't want to do is start pulling old dirty brake fluid all the way through the system. We don't want to get it all the way down to where there's air exposed into the lines. So we just want to get that very top layer of brake fluid out of the reservoir. Then we'll go ahead and put some fresh brake fluid into the top of the reservoir. Once we know we've introduced good clean brake fluid into the reservoir, we want to go ahead and start at the furthest point from the master cylinder and the reservoir, which is going to be the rear passenger side. So then we're going to go from rear passenger side to the rear driver's side. Then from there, we're going to go up to the front passenger side, and then we'll move up lastly up to the front driver's side. So basically we're just going to move from the furthest point up to the closest point to the master cylinder and reservoir. So the reason why you definitely want to do this job or have a shop do this job for you as a good maintenance item is because brake fluid is hygroscopic. And what that essentially means in simple terms is it will absorb moisture right out of the atmosphere. And so with atmospheric moisture building up over time into the hydraulic brake system, what that really translates into is that water is an absolute terrible hydraulic energy transfer source. And additionally, if you're doing any sort of spirited driving, autocross, road racing, or even drag racing, and you're running some pretty solid times out of your car, that H2O down at the caliper level of your brake system will begin to boil much sooner than a good quality brake fluid. So with all that, you start getting symptoms like weak braking power, brake fade, or just corrosion and brake failure altogether. So although we're looking at this particular application as a longevity and a performance application, the reality of this is a high priority maintenance item. So just make sure that you're paying attention to this. It doesn't matter if it's on your daily grocery getter or if it's on your hot rod, performance car, sports car, exotic, whatever it is. This is absolutely important all the way around. And then last in this list is kind of a quick safety warning. So back in the day, for whatever weird reason, I have seen brake fluid get on paint, whether it be on a strut tire or fender, something like that. And if it was wiped up, there was no issues whatsoever. But for whatever weird reason, if it stayed on paint, it would absolutely destroy wherever it's set. So it would basically start blistering and peeling up, and it would wrinkle, and basically you just wipe paint off with your hand. So it was pretty crazy. I don't know if it's still the same today. I don't know if it's still the same formulations, but for you and I both, I wanted to point that out and just kind of throw that out as a quick warning, because I'm not willing to find out on the GT500, and I prefer you don't find out on your vehicle. So with that, I just wanted to say, go ahead and just keep a couple of good cleaners. Like I got Chemical Gas Waterless Car Wash, or like Mother's Showtime, just something that you know can basically clean a mess up if it gets on your car for whatever weird reason. Probably won't, chances are if you're careful, but just keep a couple of good cleaners and some rags. So with that, if you get any brake fluid on your paint for whatever weird reason, just make sure you put plenty of cleaning liquid on it, wipe it up immediately. And then if you wipe it up with those rags, preferably something disposable. If it's not disposable, just go ahead and get it right into your laundry or your wash. That way you're not taking a chance of getting any brake fluid on your paint, smearing brake fluid on the paint, whatever it may be. And modern formulas may not have any issues with that. I don't know, I can't swear by it, but I just didn't want to take a chance for you or I with that. So I wanted to throw that out there real quick before we got started. That is kind of the 5,000 foot overview of what I've got going on in the shop today. With it raining outside, seemed like a cool project that I really needed to knock out. So with that, the only thing left to do is everything. So we may as well go ahead and get started. Just to show you what I've got going on here, I'm going to use that little small compressor there for the brake vac, and I've just got it regulated down to about 70 PSI, which is probably actually a little high for that little brake vac, but we should be good to go on that. And so that shows you that all you need is just a small compressor like that. I'm not going to turn on my big compressor that's outside. Now the downside to that small compressor is the fact that it is very noisy, so I won't put you through the pain of listening to that compressor. We'll go ahead and work the audio so that you don't have to listen to that thing run. But what I really wanted to show you is the master cylinder reservoir really quick. And you can see that that fluid is fairly dirty in there. So all we're going to do is we're going to take the end of our hose. We're just going to dip it down in there, and we're going to get it down as far as we can within reason to the bottom of this reservoir. And then we'll just go ahead and top it off with fresh fluid. I think you can see in there that fluid is fairly dark, had a couple little solid contaminants in there. nothing over the top. But other than that, that is some fairly dark brake fluid. We're gonna go ahead and get this reservoir topped off with some fresh, clean brake fluid. Now, when I add this fluid, I am gonna go basically all the way to the top to where the cap is. And the reason why I'm gonna do that is because we know we're gonna pull fluid through the system and it's gonna come out of the brake calipers. So I'm not worried about overfilling it right now. We'll get it back down to the correct level once we go ahead and pull fluid back through there. So that way I don't have to keep running back up here and check this, because the last thing you want to do is pull fluid all the way through your lines and create a system where you have air in it, because that air can be a barrier to get out of there. So what we don't want to do is introduce air. We want to make sure that we're constantly pulling fluid through the system. So I am going to go all the way to the top, and then once we get down to the last caliper, I can just make sure that we're at the correct level at the min-max marks, and we'll be good to go. Redline RL600. We're good to go. All right, had to make a couple of quick little adjustments on our bridge jack, but you can see that we are in the air and we are all locked in. So bridge jack locked into place. We are totally good to go. So everything is safe. We are ready to rock. Go ahead and pull off these rear tires and wheels. All right, just so that I can show you a close-up before I get up inside the fender well here working on this, that there is going to be a rubber cap right here at the top of the caliper. Fairly simple. You're just going to pop that rubber cap off like so, and that is going to be your brake bleeder right there. You're just going to put your hose from your brake vac right onto there, and you're just going to unscrew that. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. So that is the basics of it. So let me grab the brake vac and we'll get to cleaning this system out over on this side. I've got a compressor all set up, and our brake bleeder is an 11 millimeter. So I just got a good boxed in 11 millimeter, and I've got the vac all set up. I got a cap off, so ready to go. Other than that, I'm not going to bore you with this really annoying noise from this air compressor. So other than that, I'm just going to get busy and start pulling some fluid through this thing. All right, that didn't take much at all. So that fluid went from dark to really clean pretty fast. So the reality of it is those brake lines are really small. It's not like there's some crazy like 1/2 inch diameter or something. They're all really small. So with that, as long as there's no major issues, brake fluid comes out clean pretty quick. But other than that, that is going to be the rear passenger side of the GT500. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this brake bleeder snugged back down with the 11 millimeter and get the tire and wheel back on this side. Other than that, I'm not going to bore you with the other side. It's kind of tight over there against the wall for basically setting up video and working at the same time anyway. So it's the exact same process, just other side. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get this side put together, get that side over there bled out. And while I'm at it, I got my step ladder hanging on the wall over there. I'm going to hop up top and just make sure that we've still got plenty of fluid in the reservoir. We shouldn't be no problem, but I want to double check it before I take a chance of introducing any air into the system. And other than that, I will see you up at the front passenger side. All right, we have got the rear brake calipers all flushed out. And before we started on the front, I thought I'd go ahead and show you where we were at with our fluid level. So when we started, I had the fluid level just under the neck here, and our max level is right along in here. And so the lettering is actually right there where I'm pointing at with this screwdriver. And our level is now down to here. So just taking a guess, and this is just a completely wild guess, I'm gonna say this is somewhere around 1/8 of a quart or so, but that's what we've used flushing out the rear calipers. So I'll probably add just a little bit just up above the max mark and then go ahead and knock out the front calipers. And now to get into why the GT500 and a lot of the modern sports cars and muscle cars are a little bit different as far as brake bleeding and brake fluid flush is the fact that you can see on this Brembo front caliper that we do have one on the front and one on the back brake bleeders. So you can see that rubber cap peeking around the corner right there. And so these larger multi-piston brake calipers have two bleeders. They're going to be located at the top. And so you can see that we have one mounted on the outside and one mounted on the inside, whereas the rear brake caliper is pretty much just standard passenger car application. These performance front calipers are going to be a little bit different than your standard front passenger car applications. So that is one of the differences here. Just want to make sure that I point that out about you're going to have two different bleeders. And one of the major reasons for that is that these performance calipers are just physically so much larger with multi-pistons. And so it does make it more efficient to go ahead and pull the fluid through it through multi-bleeder points. Okay, so I've double checked everything. So the bleeders on the front are going to be an 11 millimeter, just like on the back. So there is our 11. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pop these caps off and I'll start running fluid through it. Those little caps are pretty tough to get off. So I just used a screwdriver and basically just got underneath the edge of it there, kind of pushed it up, and then I could get a hold of it with my dirty gloves and just pop it off. So just want to note that these rubber caps on the front were definitely a little bit harder to get off than the rear. Now for this, I think I'm going to go ahead and start with the hardest one to get to. I think I'm going to go ahead and start with the rear. All right, easy enough. It opened right up. So no stuck brake bleeders is a good thing. Let's see what we get. Did get some fluid on my gloves out of that, so I'll make sure I grabbed another towel. That way I'm not wiping brake fluid around everywhere. It should be good to go there. And then one of the things that I did do on the back that I don't think I showed is I just used some generic cleaner that I had laying around the shop. Seriously, use whatever you got. Don't go spend money on something specific. But I just basically took and sprayed a little cleaner on top of those brake bleeder nipples and just wiped everything down. I just want to make sure that I get any of that residual brake fluid off of there before I put my cap on. That way I don't have to worry about it getting on anything. So other than that, that is the rear bleeder. And we'll go ahead and get ready for this guy. Open right up. And so I think with this one positioned a little better so that you can see it, I think what I'll do is I'll actually show you kind of how I go about this. So you can see the opening there on our hose. Just pop it on, and then what I'll do a lot of times is I'll start opening the bleeder. So I guess it's about a quarter turn, and then I'll put my finger on the hex and then give it another turn, finger on the hex until I get it open just slightly. And then after that, it'll probably take about a half, maybe a full turn, something like that. Obviously you don't want to like take that thing out. That's the wrong thing to do, but probably a half a turn to a full turn, something like that. It's going to be plenty. And then after that, I can just go ahead and connect my air hose and start pulling fluid through it. And if it don't, then I can just use the same procedure, just finger on the hex, and you can see how loose this thing is now. So it shouldn't be any problem getting fluid through it. Just wanted to show you that once that initial torque is broke, basically you can just move this around by hand. It's really simple. So just want to show you kind of that trick that I figured out over the years. Just hold it and you can basically use your hose to move that bleeder open and closed. And exact same thing, I'm just gonna go ahead and get something on there just to get as much residual brake fluid off as I can. Obviously, don't use anything that could cause corrosion, rust, anything exciting like that. You can see where waterless car wash has gotten on the face of that brake rotor right there, wiping things down in the shop. So you obviously don't want that going on that. But other than that, you should be good to go. We'll go ahead and pop our cap on. And there you go. So the procedure for the driver's side is going to be the exact same as the passenger side. So I'm going to go ahead and get this wheel and tire back on, hop over to that driver's side and get that one knocked out. And once you're comfortable with all of your fluid being flushed out on your brake system, the last part is absolutely essential. Go ahead and torque down your wheels and tires. I've got our torque wrench set to 90 foot-pounds. And so just make sure that you torque in all of your lug nuts in a crisscross pattern. So we're just going to start here, go here, and I'll go ahead and knock out the other 3 tires and wheels, and we'll get everything torqued into spec. And that is the level of fluid pulled out of the 2014 Shelby GT500. And there is what that old fluid looks like. So as you can see, not any major contaminants down the bottom to be concerned about whatsoever, but it's definitely dark compared to fresh brake fluid. And that is a little bit of new brake fluid, the RL600 from Redline. And you can see just how much more clear that fluid is. Definitely does not have that dark tint. So just kind of wanted to do a visual comparison before and after. But that is our new brake fluid versus the old brake fluid. So major difference there. Now the front caliper is completely flushed. Our line is right here, and our minimum is actually right there, and our max is right there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up just below the max, probably somewhere midpoint, something like that. But that is the level that we got down to flushing the front brakes. And it actually took more to flush the front, I'm assuming because of the larger calipers. But you can see that that's how much we're down. So I'm going to go ahead and top this off. I'm going to grab the bottle. I don't want to do this one-handed, but I'll get this topped off real quick and you can see where we landed. All right, we've topped off with the RL600 Redline brake fluid, and that is our minimum mark, that is our level, and that is our max right there. And so when we topped it as much as we could for the flush, we went all the way to the bottom of the threads. And so again, that's our max. That's where we landed. And down in here is our minimum. So we're about that midpoint. I'm totally comfortable with that. So that's where we're gonna stay with topping off the master cylinder reservoir after the front brake caliper flush. And that wraps up the brake flush on the 2014 Shelby GT500. So listen, we really do hope you got some good information out of this video today, or we hope you just enjoyed hanging out with us. If you have, you know the deal. Make sure that you've hit that subscribe button and make sure that you've hit that thumbs up button. And as always, jump in for another ride.